I always knew I wasn't enough for my parents. Not smart enough. Not pretty enough. Not successful enough. But nothing made that clearer than when they didn't show up to my wedding. Empty chairs in the front row where family should be. But you know what's funny? The moment they saw my Porsche parked in their driveway, suddenly they remembered they had a daughter. Growing up as Madeline Crane meant living under a microscope. My father Walter's name was carved into marble at his law firm. My mother Regina collected friends like trophies. The richer, the better. In the Crane household, we didn't celebrate kindness or integrity. We celebrated status. Stand up straight, Madeline. The Hendersons are coming. That dress makes you look cheap, darling. Change before dinner. Why can't you be more like the Wilson girl? She's going to Yale. You know? Every day was another lesson in how I wasn't measuring up. I wore designer clothes before I could spell their names, attended galas before I had my first kiss. But inside our perfect mansion, with its perfect garden, I was drowning. I didn't want spotlights. I wanted peace. Something real. I found it on a rainy Tuesday morning at Bean Theory Cafe on 9th Avenue. I was exhausted after another dinner where my mother had paraded me in front of eligible bachelors from good families. The cafe was warm, quiet, and smelled like cinnamon. That's when I saw him. Caleb Turner. Not because he was handsome, though he was, but because when he smiled at me, it wasn't about what I could offer him. He just saw me. "Rough morning?" he asked, sliding my latte across the counter. "Rough life," I answered without thinking. He laughed. "Not at me, with me. I get that. I'm working double shifts to pay for engineering school. Some days I forget what sleep feels like." Over the next few weeks, that coffee shop became my escape. Caleb talked about dreams, not bank accounts, about building things, not buying them. For the first time, I started imagining a life where happiness wasn't measured by my parents' approval. But when they found out about the barista, everything exploded. Have you ever had someone look at your happiness and decide it wasn't good enough for them? Drop it in the comments if your family ever made you choose between their approval and your joy. Subscribe to hear what happened when I finally stood up to them, because trust me, karma comes for everyone eventually. "A barista, Madeline? You're a Crane." My mother's voice shook our crystal chandelier. She paced our marble kitchen, her heels clicking like a ticking bomb. "Do you have any idea what people will think? He's after your money, your family name. Can't you see that?" My father didn't yell. Walter Crane didn't need to. His disappointment was a weapon all its own. He looked at me over his reading glasses, his Wall Street Journal folded perfectly beside his untouched breakfast. "You're smarter than this, Maddie. Don't ruin your future." My future, not my happiness, not my love. My future, which in their eyes meant marrying someone with the right connections, the right background, the right bank account. "I don't want your version of a future," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I want mine." From that day, they began their campaign. They forgot to invite me to family events. My mother told her friends I was taking time to find myself, her polite way of saying I'd lost my mind. At Sunday dinners, they'd casually mention the son of some CEO who was still single and asking about me. Meanwhile, Caleb and I grew closer. His tiny apartment above a bookstore became more home to me than my parents' mansion ever was. He worked mornings at the cafe, afternoons at his engineering internship, and nights on his startup idea, smart energy systems that could revolutionize how homes use power. "It's not much now," he'd say, showing me his sketches. "But someday, it'll change things." I believed him. Not because I was naive, but because when Caleb talked about the future, it wasn't about impressing people. It was about helping them. 6 months in, my mother cornered me at a charity event I hadn't expected her to attend. "This little rebellion has gone on long enough," she hissed, smiling for anyone who might be watching. "You're embarrassing us." "I'm happy, Mom," I said simply. She looked at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. Happiness doesn't pay bills, Madeline. Status does. When Caleb proposed a year later, I knew exactly what my parents would say. So I didn't ask for their blessing. I simply sent an invitation. The day before my wedding, I stared at my phone for hours. No missed calls, no texts, just silence from the two people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. I kept thinking maybe, just maybe, they'd show up anyway. That's the thing about hope. It makes you stupid sometimes. Our wedding was beautiful in its simplicity. A garden ceremony with fairy lights and wildflowers. No designer dresses or champagne fountains, just love, pure and honest. As I walked down the aisle, my eyes kept drifting to those two empty seats in the front row, the chairs we'd reserved for my parents, with their names written in my own handwriting. They never came. Caleb squeezed my hand when he saw me looking. "Hey," he whispered, "I'm your family now." And he was right. The room was filled with people who chose to be there. His parents who hugged me like their own daughter, friends who celebrated us without judgment, co-workers who took time off to witness our joy. But still, those empty chairs screamed louder than the applause. The next morning, while we were packing for our modest honeymoon, a weekend at a lakeside cabin, my phone buzzed. For a split second, I thought it might be them, an apology, an explanation. Instead, it was a notification. My mother had posted a family photo on Facebook, just her and my father at some fancy restaurant. The caption read, "Family dinner night. So proud of my amazing husband and all he's achieved this year." No mention of me, no congratulations, no acknowledgement that their only daughter had just gotten married. I didn't cry. I was done crying. Instead, I deleted my mother's number, blocked both their accounts, and promised myself something. I would never again chase love that had to be earned. "Ready?" Caleb asked, loading our bags into his beat-up Honda. "More than ever," I replied. As we drove away, I felt lighter somehow. Like I'd finally put down a weight I'd been carrying my whole life, the weight of never being enough. What I didn't know then was that my parents' rejection wasn't the end of our story. It was just the beginning. And the next chapter would turn everything upside down in ways none of us could have imagined. Have you ever cut someone toxic out of your life, only to have them try to crawl back when they needed something? Comment below if you've experienced this. I read every single one. 2 years can change everything. While my parents were busy pretending I didn't exist, Caleb's career took off like a rocket. His smart energy startup began with just him and 2 college friends working out of our apartment. Late nights, endless coffee, and whiteboards covered in equations I couldn't understand. They landed one small contract, then another. A local builder wanted their system in a new development. Then, a tech magazine featured their work. "We're getting noticed," Caleb said one night, exhausted but glowing with excitement. I never bragged, never posted updates about his success, never called my parents to prove them wrong. Instead, I focused on us, building a home filled with laughter, supporting his dreams, creating the warm family environment I never had. Then came the meeting that changed everything. A major tech investor saw their prototype and offered funding that valued their startup in the millions. Overnight, Caleb went from struggling entrepreneur to successful CEO. We celebrated quietly, a bottle of champagne on our apartment rooftop watching the sunset. No fancy party, no showing off, just us, grateful for how far we'd come. "We should buy a house," Caleb suggested. "Something with a yard." "Let's not rush," I said. "I like our life as it is." But on my birthday, 3 months later, Caleb handed me a small box. Inside wasn't jewelry. It was a single key with a red ribbon tied around it. "It's not a house," he grinned. "It's something better. Come outside." Parked in front of our apartment was a silver Porsche Taycan, sleek, new, and apparently mine. I was speechless. We'd always been careful with money, planning for the future, living modestly despite the company's success. "You've been through enough," Caleb said, wrapping his arms around me. "You deserve to be seen, but this time on your own terms." I laughed, hugged him, and later posted a single picture of myself leaning against the Porsche with the caption, "Blessed to build a life with someone who believes in me." Not my background. I didn't tag anyone. I didn't boast. But 3 days later, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. 3 days after posting that photo, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Unknown number. Again and again. I ignored it until the fourth call when something told me to answer. "Madeline, it's your mother." My heart stopped. Regina's voice sounded different, shaken, uncertain, even nervous. This wasn't the confident socialite who'd ruled my childhood with designer heels and cutting remarks. "Honey, we saw your post on Instagram," she continued when I didn't respond. "Your father and I were just wondering, where is all this money coming from?" I almost laughed out loud. 3 months of silence, missing my wedding, pretending I didn't exist, and now they were just wondering about my finances. "Why do you care?" I asked quietly. "Well, people are talking." Her voice pitched higher. "They're asking questions. I mean, a Porsche? That's extravagant. We just want to make sure you're okay." Translation: "We're embarrassed that we can't explain your sudden wealth to our friends." "Maybe we could come visit this weekend," she suggested, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. That's when I realized what was happening. It wasn't concern in my mother's voice. It was panic. Panic that maybe, just maybe, their embarrassment of a daughter had risen above them, that the barista they'd dismissed might actually be successful. "I'll check our schedule," I said coolly. "I'll let you know." After hanging up, I sat on our couch for a long time, staring at nothing. Caleb found me there an hour later. "You okay?" he asked. "My parents called. They want to visit." His eyebrows shot up. "The same parents who couldn't make it to our wedding?" "The very same. Apparently, they're very interested in our finances now." Caleb sat beside me, taking my hand. "What do you want to do?" I thought about it for a moment. "I want closure, and maybe I want them to see exactly what they missed out on." So I called my mother back and agreed to dinner, at their house, on their turf. But this time I'd be the one in control. The drive to my parents' mansion felt surreal. I hadn't been back in over a year. As Caleb parked the Porsche in their circular driveway, right where everyone could see it, I took a deep breath. "Remember," he said, squeezing my hand, "we don't owe them anything." My mother opened the door before we could knock, her eyes immediately darting to the car behind us, then to Caleb's watch, his shoes, even the car keys he held. "Darling," she exclaimed, air-kissing both my cheeks. "You look different." The house hadn't changed. Still perfect, still cold. Family photos lined the hallway, carefully arranged to show the Cranes at charity galas, on exotic vacations, at country clubs. None of me after high school. My father waited in the dining room, standing stiffly by his chair. "Madeline," he nodded. Then, extending his hand to Caleb, "Good to see you again, son." Son. As if he'd ever treated Caleb like family. Dinner was a masterclass in awkward conversation. Weather, local news, careful avoidance of the past year. Until my father, ever the strategist, finally said, "So, Caleb, we've been following your company's success. Impressive. Must be rewarding." Caleb nodded politely. "We've been blessed. It's hard work, but worth it." My mother forced a laugh, refilling her wine glass for the third time. "Well, darling, I suppose you did marry well after all." The air went cold. There it was, the real reason for this dinner. In their eyes, Caleb was only valuable now because he had money. I set down my fork. Funny. That's not what you said when you told people I was marrying beneath me. Regina's face flushed. You misunderstood. No, I interrupted, my voice steady. I understood perfectly. You cared more about appearances than my happiness. And now that you see I didn't need your approval, suddenly you want to be part of my life again? My father leaned back, sighing. We're family, Madeline. Don't make this about money. I couldn't help but laugh. You're right. It's not about money. It's about value. And you never saw mine until it came with a price tag. If you've ever had to stand up to toxic family members, hit that subscribe button right now. Drop a comment sharing how you handled it. Did you confront them like I did, or find another way? I'm reading every comment and responding to as many as I can. I stood up, Caleb following my lead. My mother called after me, but I just turned and said, You didn't lose me when I married Caleb. You lost me the day you decided love was a transaction. And with that, I left. For good this time. Or so I thought. Life was peaceful after I walked out of my parents' mansion. Months passed. Caleb's company grew. We bought our dream home. Nothing flashy, just warm and ours. I rarely thought about my parents anymore. Until one morning, when an email changed everything. Subject, urgent. Assistance requested. I almost deleted it, thinking it was spam. But the sender caught my eye. Walter Crane Law Partners, my father's firm. The email was brief, formal. My father's company was under federal investigation for financial misconduct. Their accounts were frozen, their reputation in ruins. The man who once measured everyone by wealth had lost everything. I stared at my screen for a long time, feeling nothing, then everything. Anger, satisfaction, pity, confusion. What are you going to do? Caleb asked when I showed him. Nothing, I said. It's not my problem. But that evening, my phone rang. My mother's number. I let it go to voicemail. Then she called again, and again. On the fourth call, I answered. Madeline, she sobbed, her voice barely recognizable. We've lost the house. Your father is sick. We have nowhere to go. The mighty Regina Crane, reduced to begging. Part of me wanted to hang up, to let them face the consequences of their actions. They'd built their lives on appearances and status, and now those things were gone. But another part remembered the little girl who'd once loved them before I understood what conditional love meant. What happened? I asked, my voice neutral. Your father. He made some bad investments, then tried to cover them up. The firm found out. Now there's an investigation, and they've frozen everything. We can't access our accounts. Our credit cards are canceled. The bank is foreclosing on the house. I closed my eyes, thinking of all the times they'd judged others for having less, all the times they'd used money as a weapon. Please, she whispered. We have nowhere else to turn. I sat in silence for a long time. Finally, I said, You're welcome to stay at our guest house for a while, but not because you earned it, because I refuse to be like you. She was speechless. And if you ever tell people Caleb married me for money, remember this conversation. As I hung up, I wondered if I'd just made the biggest mistake of my life. My parents moved into our guest house on a rainy Tuesday. They arrived in a taxi, not a luxury car. Their designer clothes packed in ordinary suitcases. My father looked older, smaller somehow. My mother's perfect makeup couldn't hide her exhaustion. Thank you, my father said quietly as Caleb helped with their bags. The words sounded foreign coming from him. The guest house was comfortable but simple. No marble countertops or crystal chandeliers, just clean, functional, and warm. My mother looked around with thinly veiled disappointment. It's cozy, she managed. Over the next few weeks, they lived quietly on our property. I set boundaries. No unexpected visits to the main house, no criticizing our lifestyle, no comments about Caleb. They agreed to everything, humbled by their downfall. They watched from a distance as the daughter they once mocked became everything they had pretended to be: respected, successful, and genuinely happy. One evening, I found my father sitting alone on the guest house porch. His hands trembled slightly as he stared out at nothing. "I was wrong," he said when I sat beside him. Tears filled his eyes. "All those years, I thought money made us better, but it only made us blind." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. "I'm sorry, Maddie, for everything. For missing your wedding, for judging Caleb, for not seeing what was right in front of me. That you found something real." His voice broke on the last word. This proud man, this titan of industry who never apologized, was crying openly now. "You taught me everything not to be," I said finally, my voice gentle but firm. "And for that, I forgive you." Later that week, my mother cornered me in the garden, still proud but visibly broken. "We just wanted the best for you," she said softly. I looked at her directly. "No, Mom, you wanted the best for your image. There's a difference." As I walked back to my home that night, hand in hand with Caleb, I looked back one last time. The guest house lights glowed softly in the darkness. It was strange how life had come full circle. The same parents who once made me feel small now lived in my shadow. But revenge wasn't what I expected it to be. It felt hollow somehow. Exactly 1 year after my parents' collapse, Caleb and I stood in front of a construction site, not for our new vacation home or some luxury property, but for something that mattered. A modest building that would soon house foster kids who had nowhere else to go. "What do you think?" Caleb asked, his arm around my waist. "I think it's perfect," I replied, watching workers install windows. We decided to use a portion of the company's success to build something meaningful. A place where children could feel safe, wanted, and valued for who they were, not what they could become or who their parents were. That evening, I posted a photo of us holding hands in front of the building. The caption read, "Wealth isn't what's in your driveway, it's what's in your heart." No mention of my parents, no subtle digs, just a simple truth I'd learned the hard way. The post went viral, not because of the Porsche or our success, but because the message resonated with thousands of people who had ever been dismissed, belittled, or underestimated. Comments flooded in. "This hit me hard. My family never thought I'd amount to anything. I needed to hear this today. Thank you. You're building something beautiful from your pain." From the guest house window, I sometimes caught my mother watching me, watching as reporters came to interview us about the foster home project, watching as community leaders praised our initiative, watching as the daughter they once rejected became someone people genuinely admired. One afternoon, I found her sitting alone in her small kitchen. "Your father and I used to host charity galas," she said quietly, "but we never actually built anything. We just wrote checks and took photos." I nodded, unsure what to say. "You're doing it differently," she continued. "You're actually helping." It wasn't an apology, but it was something, a crack in the perfect facade, a glimpse of the woman who might have existed beneath all that conditioning. "Would you like to help?" I asked. "We need volunteers at the site." Her eyes widened with surprise. "Me? What could I possibly do?" "You could try being useful instead of just looking important," I said. "It's actually quite rewarding." My father's health declined rapidly that winter. The doctor called it heart failure, but I wondered if it wasn't something else, the collapse of everything he'd built his identity around. I visited him daily in the hospital, watching machines keep track of his fading life. The mighty Walter Crane reduced to a thin figure in a hospital gown. "Maddie," he whispered one evening when we were alone, "I need to tell you something." I leaned closer, holding his cold hand. "My father, your grandfather, he was just like me," he said, his voice weak. "Obsessed with status, with appearances. He taught me that love was conditional, that respect had to be earned through success. I'd never heard him speak of my grandfather this way. I thought I was protecting you, he continued, teaching you how the world works. But I was wrong, so wrong. Tears slid down his hollow cheeks. I have one request, he said. Help your mother find purpose beyond status. She's lost without it, more lost than I ever was. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. He died 3 days later. The funeral was small, nothing like the grand event he would have planned in his former life. His old colleagues sent flowers but didn't attend. Fair weather friends made excuses. The empire he'd built had crumbled completely. A week later, we gathered for the reading of the will. My mother sat stiffly beside me, dressed in black, her face a careful mask. The lawyer cleared his throat. Mr. Crane made changes to his will shortly before his passing. My mother straightened, likely expecting to finally access whatever assets remained. He has left his remaining personal possessions to his wife, Regina Crane. She nodded, satisfied. However, all financial assets, including insurance policies, investments, and future settlements from ongoing litigation, are to be donated to the Crane Foster Home Foundation, to be established in his name. My mother gasped. That's impossible. There must be a mistake. The lawyer shook his head. Mr. Crane was very clear about his wishes. I sat in shock. My father had left everything to the very project he once would have dismissed. And in doing so, he'd left my mother completely dependent on me. As we left the office, she turned to me, her face pale. What am I supposed to do now? I looked at her directly. Learn to live differently, just like I had to. I am not cleaning bathrooms, my mother declared, standing in our kitchen with her arms crossed. I have a degree from Vassar. I looked up from my laptop. Then you'll need to find your own place. The agreement was you'd help with the foster home project to earn your keep. It had been 2 weeks since my father's will reading. 2 weeks of my mother's complaints, excuses, and thinly veiled insults about our charity case. This is beneath me, she insisted. No, Mom, nothing is beneath you anymore. That's the point. The next morning, she showed up at the foster home construction site wearing designer pants that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her hands were manicured, her makeup perfect, as if she were attending a charity luncheon instead of actual charity work. What do I do? She asked the site manager, holding her purse like it might get stolen. Paint that wall, he said, pointing to a half-finished bedroom. For 3 hours, she worked in silence, carefully applying pale blue paint to the walls of what would become a teenage girl's room. I checked on her occasionally, expecting complaints. But something strange happened instead. She kept working, day after day, at first mechanically, then with increasing care. She suggested better storage solutions for the kids' rooms, organized the donation closet with military precision, started planning a small garden behind the building. One afternoon, a month into her community service, I found her sitting on the floor with a 12-year-old girl who'd come to tour her future home. You'll have your own desk by the window, my mother was saying, for homework or whatever you like to do. No one's ever given me my own desk before, the girl said quietly. My mother paused, something shifting in her expression. Well, everyone deserves their own space, somewhere they can just be themselves. Later, as we drove home, she was unusually quiet. That girl thanked me, she finally said. Not for giving her anything expensive, just for listening. I nodded, waiting. I've spent my whole life being thanked for donations or party invitations, she continued. Never just for seeing someone. She turned to look out the window. I think I understand now. What you've been trying to tell me all these years. Madeline, darling. Carolyn Westfield air-kissed my cheeks at the IPO celebration dinner. The same Caroline who'd once whispered loudly at a charity gala, Such a shame about the Crane girl throwing her life away on that nobody. Your company's valuation is extraordinary, she gushed. We must have you and your husband over for dinner soon. Across the room, Caleb was talking with investors, his casual confidence a stark contrast to the stiff networking I'd grown up watching my father perform. Our company had just gone public, making us wealthier than my parents had ever been. Thank you, I said politely. We're pretty busy with the foster home project, but I'll check our schedule. Her smile tightened. Oh yes, your little charity work. So noble. I spotted my mother entering the ballroom, looking different than I remembered from my childhood. Still elegant, but simpler somehow. She'd started volunteering full-time at the foster home, gradually earning respect not through her last name, but through consistent work. I'd invited her tonight, not out of obligation, but because she'd earned it. Regina! Caroline exclaimed, spotting my mother. It's been ages. We've missed you at the club. My mother smiled politely. I've been busy with more important things. Caroline's eyebrows shot up. More important than the club? Much more, my mother replied, then turned to me. Madeline, the contractor called. The East Wing bathrooms are finished. The children can move in next week. The genuine excitement in her voice was something I'd never heard growing up. Caroline looked between us, confused by this new dynamic. Well, she said finally, I should circulate. Lovely seeing you both. As she walked away, my mother leaned closer. She always was insufferable. I laughed, surprised. You used to call her your dearest friend. I used to call a lot of things by the wrong names, she replied. Then, more seriously, including what matters in life. I introduced her to investors that night simply as my mother. No qualifiers, no status. And for the first time, that seemed enough for her. 5 years after my parents lost everything, I stood in the nursery of our home, watching my mother rock my newborn daughter. The same woman who once measured love in dollar signs now sang lullabies with genuine joy. She has your eyes, my mother whispered, gently touching my daughter's cheek. And Caleb's stubborn chin, I added, smiling. Life had come full circle in ways I never could have predicted. The Crane family name, once associated with my father's prestigious law firm, was now known for our foundation. We'd opened 3 more foster homes across the state. My mother ran the volunteer program, working longer hours than she ever had as a socialite. Do you ever miss it? I asked her one evening as we sat on the porch. Your old life? She thought for a moment. I miss the certainty, she admitted. Knowing exactly who I was supposed to be, even if it wasn't real. She looked at me. But no, I don't miss who I was. That night, as Caleb and I lay in bed, I thought about revenge. For years, I'd imagined making my parents sorry they'd rejected me. I'd fantasized about proving them wrong, about watching them regret their choices. But real revenge wasn't what I expected. It wasn't about making them suffer. It wasn't even about proving them wrong. The sweetest revenge was living so fully that their absence became irrelevant. Building a life so authentic that their approval no longer mattered. Creating the kind of love they never taught me to value. And perhaps the most unexpected part? Watching my mother transform from the person who hurt me into someone capable of genuine love. What are you thinking about? Caleb asked, noticing my silence. How revenge isn't what I thought it would be, I replied. He propped himself up on one elbow. How so? I thought it would feel like winning, but it feels more like freedom. The next day, I found an old photo album in the attic. Pictures of my childhood, stiff family portraits where no one quite smiled. I placed it next to our new family photos, candid shots full of laughter and real connection. The contrast said everything. If you've ever wondered if people can truly change, drop a comment below. I never thought my mother could become someone different, but life has a way of surprising us. Subscribe for more stories about family, forgiveness, and finding your own path to happiness.